Testing. All right, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Chantal, and I'm very excited to be here hosting this wonderful panel for the Imagine This Women's Film Festival. We've got here today Maribeth Fox, we've got Brianna Dunley, and we've got Betsy Fippinger. Did I say that correctly? Okay, perfect. Please help me give them a warm welcome. They're a wonderful panel of New York casting directors, and they're here today to discuss the process of putting together a cast and the obstacles they face sometimes, from the first meeting with the director up until the first day on set. I think we can all agree that it takes immense talent to cast amazing talent. So thank you guys for being here to share insights. I think we'll just start with you guys introducing yourselves and tell us how you got into this business in the first place and about some of your favorite projects.
Sure. Hi, my name is Maribeth. I've been a casting director for about, 16, 17 years, or in the casting world for 16, 17 years, maybe a little longer. I started on the agency side after I graduated from college and had lots of internship experiences to cross things off in that I didn't want to do, like production and carrying people's suitcases and, doing all those different kinds of things. Publicity, that was really difficult. And I really liked being on the agency side because I loved actors and I loved them as artists and I appreciated them and I felt like I understood what they had to offer. And then quickly realized I was missing out on this fabulous job that was on the other side of the table, getting to watch these beautiful artists do their work. I was like, oh, this is silly. Like, why would I try to be responsible financially for someone's career if I could just watch them do their thing? And so I switched over to casting, and it's a very happy experience. I think some of my favorite projects have been, recently I loved the collaborative experience of a film called Bottoms, which was a very fun romp with two very young, creative filmmakers. And I'm really excited. I want to put a pitch in. A film of mine just released yesterday, and it's called A Different Man with A24 and Killer Films with Sebastian Stan. That's really special. That's one of my faves.
Thank you so much. Everyone check that out.
Mm-hmm. Hi everyone, my name is Brianna. I have been doing casting since I graduated college. I never did the agent or manager side. I honestly just started it kind of randomly. I applied to a bunch of internships of things I didn't study in college and that I'd never tried, and casting was one of them, and I really liked it. I did another internship and met Betsy there, and that internship just kind of started my casting career, and I've been doing it ever since. So I've worked with a bunch of different casting directors. All of them have been amazing, so I've been very fortunate in who I've worked with, and then I also do some freelance on my own. But yeah, just some of my favorite projects. Honestly, like, no matter the budget, like a project is good based off of like who you're working with more than anything. So like some of my favorite projects might be like a big TV show that I worked on because the team was amazing, but also like a lower budget indie because the team was amazing. It's just like when a team is very collaborative, when everyone's on the same page and they really just we understand each other and we listen to each other's like opinions and just like the thought, like what we hope for this project. Like it's not every project, but when you have that really collaborative team, it just makes the experience so awesome. So like every project that I think of as my favorite, it's like not necessarily like, oh, the script was my favorite or how it did in the box office was my favorite. It's just the process of working on it and the team that I got to work with.
Such a good answer.
Yes, it's all about the journey, I agree. We have to like the journey because you don't know what's going to happen after. I just want to say that my favorite casting of last year was Bottoms.
Aww.
I thought it was so beautifully cast. So my name's Betsy, and I got into casting because I was an actor all growing up. That was my main hobby, and acted in college. And I knew that I felt a bit too, not practical is not the word, but I would be kind of too nervous to have acting as a career because I needed something that was a bit more stable. And so I went on to be a Hollywood assistant. I worked at the William Morris Agency at HBO, and then took a break from film and TV to go follow my husband when he got a PhD. So then when I was coming back and deciding where to enter, I just had a lot of friends say to me, like, why do you never talk about doing casting? You love actors, you love analyzing acting, you love talking about acting, you love when you see a movie, you just talk about the casting. And I was like, oh, I would never even thought of that because casting's not a very visible career. And so then I started and I just immediately fell in love with it, and it just felt immediately like the right thing for me. Because I love to just like analyze. When I was acting, the thing I was best at, which also hurt me mentally, mental health wise, was like overanalyzing every piece of acting. And so now, rather than like tearing myself apart and overanalyzing what I'm doing, I get to just overanalyze what other people are doing, but in the loving way I would hope someone would do it for me if I was, the actor. And then my favorite projects to work on, I was the casting associate under Meredith Tucker on a movie called 8th Grade, and that was one of my favorite things ever. I loved the cast we got, and Bo Burnham, the writer-director, was just one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life. He's like a genius, a kind person. That was a great process. And then I just had a movie that was just at the Venice Film Festival called Familiar Touch. It hasn't been bought yet. But that was such a wonderful collaborative process. And that movie filmed in a retirement home, and different people, they taught filmmaking for 4 weeks before they shot the movie, and then different people who lived in the care facility were like ADs and were like, boom operators and set decorators, and they all helped in the movie, and some of them were the smaller roles in the film, and it was just like a beautiful film. So it just won some awards at Venice, and that was nice to see it get recognized. Hopefully it will be bought.
Let's clap for that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies. We are truly very lucky. So I think we can all agree that casting is one of the key ingredients in making a film or production. I know for myself, when I watch anything, that's what I remember, as well as the actor, how well they portrayed something. Of course, the script's also important, but casting is definitely what draws me in. How important is it that casting is now a presence in the Oscar category?
Oh, I don't know.
Like, do you like that it's finally being appreciated,
yes,
not just this behind the
sure.
scenes?
Something that I learned from my long-term boss and mentor, Laura Rosenthal, she always said, we are behind the scenes for a reason, and we don't do this for awards and accolades, and it's not the most, far from the most important thing. But it is nice to have some visibility to the art form that I think we all work really hard at. We train for a really long time to go from casting intern to casting assistant, associate, and then earn our place in the casting director list. And so just the journey that you have to go, and it's almost like learning any other trade in any other industry. You really put a lot of heart and soul into it. So yeah, I think to be honored in that potential way as an art form is delightful, but not why we do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, nice to be
Definitely nice to be recognized. I feel like sometimes, I don't know, you work on a project and then like you see the cast and people kind of forget about us and that we were in your audition and we showed your tape to the team.
Yeah.
So it's definitely nice to be recognized. Yeah, because not everyone knows, I feel like, our industry and that like we're a thing. So it's like, oh, here we are.
Yeah, for me, there's a difference between, I don't think any of us, people in casting are pretty humble people. I don't think it's that any of us want a ton of attention, but what we don't want is to be invisible and unrecognized. And so I think the difference is it's not about the attention, but it's about when everyone's erasing you, you hear interviews with directors and it's like, how did you find that actor? And they're like, oh, I just thought of this person. And it's like, well, you thought of them because we said our top 3 choices were this person and you picked one of the 3, or, and so to be erased in that way, I think has been hard for a lot of people. And so what's important about the Oscar is if we get more visibility, maybe we won't be so easy to erase in that way. And I think just, if this isn't too crass or activist-y an answer, it's also hopefully going to make a difference, and we're one of the lowest paid jobs in film. And I think part of that is because we don't have some of the visibility and some of the fanciness. So you hope that some things like an Oscar do some things to kind of make you a more equal member of the team. Because especially in like a film festival like this, where there's a lot of independent smaller movies and shorts, and when those first indie movies are being made, there's usually been a casting director working for 2 years to get people attached to that movie. So the idea that the casting director then wouldn't be honored in the same way as people who worked on it for 6 weeks feels unfair, that we should be like part of the team who's being
100%.
recognized. Yeah.
No, I 100% agree with that. And definitely think you guys deserve all the credit, especially given all these wonderful projects that you guys worked on. And a lot of them, I am a big fan favorite. So, all right, the next question is, for some of these projects you guys mentioned, what are the first steps you take in the casting process? So just walk us through it for someone who's never had to deal with casting at all. From the moment you get, I don't know, the script or whatever it is, they call you, they hire you to cast a movie or a project or a TV show. What's your first step?
Yeah, so I think a lot of us, as we're reading, we start kind of casting it in our heads. It helps you read it to see the movie in your head. And then we'll start with the lead roles, and those are usually roles where you're just making a list and having discussions with people about who you might offer the part to. And then when you get to some of the smaller roles, we're going to agents, telling them about the roles. We're putting the roles out onto Breakdown Express, and the agents give us a bunch of ideas. And we see some of those actors from those ideas, but we also call the agents and say, hey, you didn't submit so-and-so. They'd be really good for this. Why did you not submit them? And they say, oh, they're too big for that part. And you say, well, I'm sending the audition anyway. And then they audition, and it's great. And so then the rest of the roles we find usually from auditions, and that's kind of the fastest way I can. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And everyone agrees with that?
Everyone
All right.
agrees.
All right.
Agreement.
Amazing. And so,
Because we could give a 2-hour answer, but it's not
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then when the actors show up to this audition, what are the qualities you're looking for these actors? Like, what is it this is the wow effect? This is why, like, you shortlist them? Or do you ever feel like, okay, this is it, we're done? Like, I'm not even gonna, the rest of the interviews for the day are just pointless.
Yeah. So when I look at a script, I always see it more as like a two-dimensional character. When we send the breakdown, I feel like we give like a pretty simple version of that character. So what I'm looking for in an audition is that I want to give you this two-dimensional character, and I want you to make it three-dimensional. I want you to bring something like a character quirk of your own and bring it into the role and make it feel real and make it feel authentic, because a lot of people will do really great auditions, but they'll kind of do what's on the page, and that's awesome, but then it's like I just saw 20 of the same exact auditions, and it's like, you did a great job, but so did all these 20 people, but then it's like that person comes in and they bring qualities of themselves to the role, and it's like, now it's not a character, it's not a role, like this is a real person, this is someone who like I resonate with, who I know, and those auditions always stand out, and you just get a better sense of them, you get to see the character in like a whole new light, and it just gets everyone excited, gets the director excited, gets the writer. I feel like I've worked on so many projects where like someone will bring something that we didn't see on the page at all, and then they'll rewrite the role because they just liked it so much. So I'm always looking for like someone to make it three-dimensional.
Yeah, I mean, those were great answers. I think too, for actors, it's really interesting to see, what you said is so right, where you see 20 of the same thing, and then the 4 that kind of stay in your mind are the ones that found their own unique way in. I think actors are trained to respect the writing, but they're trained and they're given Shakespeare and the classics, and they're like, here, respect this. And so I really have a good time with people who find a playful way to like elevate the writing, because I don't think you have to be as respectful of like, I don't know, an episodic TV show's writing as you do of Shakespeare. And so the people that can kind of, even if it's just the favorite part of my job is when you've watched 20 tapes and like the 21st tape just took a period differently or cut it or didn't do the beat that the writer suggested who'd never even heard it out loud. And I'm like, oh, I actually now understand that scene so much better. Thank you so much. Now you've actually not respected the writing, you've elevated the writing in a really exciting and new way. That's my favorite part.
I love that. I love how you said that. Elevate and still respect the writing. And when you are looking at all these actors and you're bringing people in, I know that casting plays a big role in terms of the diversity we're seeing on our screens these days, and like things are changing for the better. How much of a role do you guys play really in that process, and how much is that playing a part in your decisions when you are casting?
Yeah, I think we're trying to do a better job at moving the industry away from tokenism. And to just doing it to check a box. And a lot of that depends on diverse folks writing their own stories. I can't cast what you don't write. And I think that's where we have to do better. We have to offer opportunities and grant money for people to take the time to write their own experiences and their own stories, And I was thinking about that, Betsy, when you were talking about being here today, or with winning the Oscar. It's like having casting be a job that everybody thinks that they can have. You know, we need to do a better job too at making our own, every part of the industry a more diverse playground and place to be. But yes, I mean, I think part of our job is to always think outside of the box in terms of casting. Why can't this be open ethnicity? This should be able to be open ethnicity. We don't know who the father is. What if this person was mixed race? A lot of the times, casting directors are the first one to ask those questions. And because we work with and for a lot of people, sometimes those answers are no. But you try to push for a yes to make it a more diverse and inclusive space. And I think we are doing a better job, but we've still got a long way to go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, we really push on our end for people to just think outside the box. And people come to us and they're really thinking in a certain way. And it's one of the things we do is to try to like get them to think of all the possibilities it can be. I once worked on a project where I was just casting the kid for something, and I could tell that everyone was seeing the parents weren't cast yet, but they were the leads. And I could tell that everyone was just assuming they were white because the writer was white and the director was white and the producers were white. And it's like, but they don't have to be white, you know? And so I said, hi, I'm just casting the kid, but like, I'm gonna look for every ethnicity if it's okay with you. And they were like, oh, okay. And then the best kid that we found for it was half Asian, half white. And so then these Asian actresses are getting offered the lead of the movie, you know, instead of, because of the kid they found that they liked. So a lot of the times our job is to like open people's minds up to, you know, that it can be everything, that it doesn't have to be fit into a box, that a trans actor doesn't just have to play a role that's trans. They can just like play the female actor or whatever. You know, I think we're constantly trying to push that.
I love that. Thank you for doing that. So yeah, that deserves an applause. It's always great seeing yourself represented on screen. So I'm Lebanese, and whenever I see anyone that's even, you know, half Arab, have anything, I'm like, yes, thank you. I'm so glad to see you out there. So thank you for all the decisions you make to make that happen. And in terms of other decisions you made, can each one of you please discuss a very successful decision you think you made that made the project extremely successful? Like a casting decision that you think, okay, that's the one that you're the most proud of.
Some of them we can't say.
Oh, okay. the most successful one.
I go first. I think I go.
My favorite casting decision, I think, has been finding Millicent Simmons for Wonderstruck, which is a Todd Haynes Amazon feature that Laura and I and our whole crew worked tirelessly on to find a deaf actor for the lead who could handle themselves versus Julianne Moore. And we scoured the entire world, called every deaf organization, and I remember the moment I opened Millie's tape, and I was like, oh, got it. Like, you are otherworldly, special, ethereal creature that I've never seen any actor do what you can do on a camera before. And so that felt super special. And, you know, it's interesting, like we talk about, casting directors are always really hesitant to say, oh, I discovered that person. Yeah. And I didn't discover Millie. Millie's English teacher gave her a flyer, and Millie, like her English teacher had encouraged her to be in the school plays and thought she was great and gave her the flyer to audition for Wonderstruck. So we didn't discover Millie by any means, but that felt really special. And then casting Millie helped us to realize there are all these roles in Wonderstruck that we could actually put deaf actors in too. And so then we ended up changing 12 of the co-star roles to be deaf actors. And I feel really proud of that because, again, it's like exposure and it's all because of Millie that decision was made. So I feel pretty proud about that.
I love that. That's amazing. That definitely deserves a round of applause. I love that.
I wouldn't say this is it was like a make or break situation, but this is just like a fun story I like to tell. So I worked on this movie called King of Staten Island, and it's about firefighters. And so if you've seen the movie, there's quite a few real firefighters in it. But we were trying to find like a female firefighter, and we auditioned all these actors, and there was just like something, like they were good, but there was something not like super authentic about them. You couldn't totally believe that they were firefighters. But so when the process started, we were like, oh, let's get like the FDNY calendar just for fun, like put it on like in the office just for inspiration. And so we're auditioning all these females. We're just really not having any luck. And so we're like, look at this calendar with all these firefighters on it. So I messaged all the female firefighters on Facebook. 3 of them answered, 2 of them auditioned, and 1 of them booked it. So if you've ever seen that movie, there's one female firefighter. We found her from the calendar. She had never done any acting in her life, and she came and she brought like 6 different props and like had this full choreographed scene and was like going back and forth the entire room, like in and out of frame. I'm like following her like crazy. And we're like, why don't you just sit? Let's just have a conversation. And then we're like, tell us like about your job. Like this is what we're really interested in. She like told us a story how she had to like deliver a kid because she was the first one arriving and the woman was about to give birth, and we just like recorded her talking about her job and just like the passion that she had within her job, and we sent that as her audition, and she got it. And now she has like an agent, and she was like, I love this. This is awesome. But that's always just like a fun story.
Oh, I love that.
I think one that I'm proud of is I did the kid casting for Are You There? Got It To Me, Margaret.
So good.
And thank you. And I'm glad Maribeth liked it. And so there's this the kind of second kid lead is this girl Nancy, this part of Nancy who's like the best friend. And so I had seen all these girls for Nancy, had girls from LA send self-tapes. I auditioned a bunch of people in New York. I was getting self-tapes from all over the country. This is like a week before COVID hit. And I sent them on and had my favorites and whatever. And so then my job was over, it was COVID, and they were having some callbacks a couple months later, and they just felt like they couldn't find it. And the director kept talking to me about kind of like the qualities, and I was like, oh, I can, picture her exactly what you're looking for. But I wasn't on the movie. And so in September, they reached out and they were like, okay, so we have a casting director now, she's looking, but we need you to re-look for Nancy in New York. And I was like, okay, well, we just read all these girls 6 months ago. So A, I don't think a ton of them would have changed a lot, and B, it's just been 6 months of COVID. So like no one's just decided to get an agent or anything. There's not like a bunch of new people. And I said, I think we have it actually, but a lot of these people were self-taping from around the country, and so because they self-taped, they were doing their own take on it, but they never worked with anyone. They never got a call back. And so I wrote an email and I was like, you can hire me for a bunch of money, I'll take your money and I'll do a few more weeks, or there are these 4 girls and you can have them to LA and you can have them for callbacks, tell them exactly what you want them to do, and they're good enough that one of them will book it. And the producer was like, okay, I'll send this along. And then she emailed me back 2 weeks later and she was like, one of them booked it, we're obsessed with her, she did an amazing job, thank you so much. And so sometimes it's just telling them like, you already found it,
You got it. That's amazing. I love that in a lot of these like answers you guys are telling us about your instinct. I definitely feel like there is a talent to finding all these talents, and like you just have this gut instinct that to just say this is the right one, or you have the right talent right there in front of your nose. So I love that. The next question is kind of similar to some of the things you just said. It's about how do you find actors for very specific roles that require special skill sets. So you mentioned firefighters, or for example, someone from the deaf community. But what about like other action scenes? Like if someone is not meant to do crazy scenes, do you just think, oh, you'll find the best actor for the role, and then later on you'll find like the body double for it? And how does body double casting work?
Well, I'll start with the specificity first. So when we're looking for something really specific, that's when we might go to Actors Access or something, because if you tell an agent that you need someone who can play the ukulele and be an expert swimmer or something, they're not going to have anyone for you. So we'll go on to Actors Access and put that out for Actors Access. But something I like to tell actors, if there are any actors in the audience, is actors love to send us an email being like, here's my headshot and resume. And that doesn't do a ton, because unless we're casting that thing that day, there's not a lot we can do with that. It's like, okay, we'll file it away, but it's not that helpful. I think it's good for the actors to feel like they're accomplishing something, but it's not actually doing much. And so what I always tell actors is, put in the body of your email, I'm an actor, here's my resume and headshot. I also speak this language. I also play this instrument. I also can, do this special thing, or I play this weird sport, or I can, put your skills in there. Because then when I'm casting something for that, I might actually go into my email and Google like Lebanese or whatever, and being like, oh, I have to cast this authentic Lebanese person. Did anyone ever say in their actor email, like, I'm a Lebanese American or whatever? And so I always say, if you're going to send those emails, at least put information in it that if we're archiving it, we can go back to later and find something. Because when you have a special skill, that's a good way to be hired for a job that you wouldn't normally get.
I love that. That's great. Do you guys want to say anything about that question? Okay. Another question related to that, it would be, let's say you do hire someone and they're wonderful for the role and they do have a special skill that was not required, but you discover it in the audition process. Do you then go, because sometimes those special skills make it onto the screen. Like you always hear in these interviews, it's like, oh, they were not supposed to play the flute, but we found out that they do play the flute, so we included that in the writing. Does that happen from the casting process, or does that happen later on? At what stage, or has that ever happened to you?
Maybe during the casting process, if you're like having a callback and because I've definitely worked on projects that the callback process is much more casual. So like when you're having those conversations, you just find out fun facts about people, and then like when they're getting to know them in that process, you're like, oh, they also do this. And then sometimes it makes it in, sometimes it doesn't. But usually it's like the more you get to know the person, the more likely it is, and like, we know them in the casting process, but you're going to know them even more when you're on set. So it just kind of depends.
Then you can tailor the role to them.
Yeah.
And everything.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. All right, I'll have a specific question for you, Maribeth. Sure. So you worked for 16 years with Laura Rosenthal Casting. And so we wanted to know what prompted you to start your own casting operation, and what are some of the exciting new directions you're exploring in casting?
Yeah, well,
congratulations.
Thank you. It was what an amazing gift. I started my career in casting at CBS Primetime Casting, and my boss at the time, I told my boss that I wanted to get into more film casting, and she said, I've got this friend, she's just got an 8-week job, are you sure you want to go off and play the freelance game and like go take a film for 8 weeks with no health insurance and like no benefits, no expense account? And I was like, I do. And eight weeks really did become 16 years, and what a beautiful relationship that was. I think a lot of it's practical. Like I'm just like at an age where I was like, if I'm going to try this on my own with my own taste and perspective, it's now or never. My kids are 11 and 14 and a bit more independent, so they can run a little bit differently, and I had less. I mean, there's always a lot to do, but like less to do in the active way. And also, I just think, I had gotten the opportunity to cast some really fun comedies under Laura's tutelage, and I had done in a very short time, I did Late Night, Brittany Runs a Marathon, The Machine, Murder Mystery 2, and then Bottoms. And I was like, I think I'm pretty good at this, and I really like casting comedically. And we all, like actors, we're all freelancers, and so we all have our own little kind of niche marketing packages as you go along. And Laura's happened to get a lot of really good comedies, but that was not kind of her bread and butter. And I had done a lot of independent work where like women were getting raped and kidnapped and children were being hurt. And it was beautiful, wonderful work. It's a lot to bring home every day. It takes a toll. And so I was like, well, I think I would like to be hungry and pursue more comedic work. And of course now on my own, my first job was a very gory, violent horror movie that's going to come out on Paramount soon. Like I have not actually gotten to cast a ton of comedy. But it is definitely a goal of mine.
Yeah, I love that. The goal to bring more joy and laughter.
Yeah, happiness. Adulting in life is hard enough.
Yeah,
let's laugh a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I love that. Thank you. Brianna, you've worked on a wide array of projects from White Lotus to Hustlers. That's two very different genres. How do you approach casting for such a varied format and genre base?
For those two processes, it was very, very different teams. Okay. So that was really why the process was so different. So like with White Lotus, like that was with Meredith Tucker and Mike White are best friends. So watching them work was so different than any other project I've ever worked on, because there was, not that there wasn't like professionalism, but it was like watching friends work, versus watching colleagues work. And so it just was a lot more casual and informal.
Also the level of trust.
Yeah, and the level of trust, like what Meredith said, Mike was like, yep, okay, definitely. And it was like, he just knew 100%, like if Meredith liked this person, that like they were the person. And just watching that, like, not from like the inside, but like close up, like that was just like, you don't work on a lot of projects where like you have that level of trust. And that this is like decades of friendship that we're talking about. So just watching that and witnessing that project was just amazing. But that project was also the craziest project I've ever worked on in my life. Like it was the first project back from the SAG strike, and like it was like 17-hour days for like 2 months, and like on the weekends as well, and it never calmed down. So that process was also just like stress. But then like with Hustlers, I worked with Gail Keller, and it was a brand new team, and it was like a kind of new director, though now she's like directed for Succession and won Emmys, but at the time she had to like beg to be able to direct her own movie, so there wasn't the level of trust the same way, even from like a producer to director, they didn't trust her as much. So then it was Gail being like, no, like, or she knows what she's doing, like, come on, this is, because she would want someone, they're like, no, we want like the biggest A-list, and it's like, yeah, but you don't need the biggest A-list to have a really like stellar like cast. So then it was kind of like pushing it, because there wasn't really a trust at all. We had to like build that trust upon, and it was like Gail and like us and like Lorene, our director, we like really came together, because like Lorene was so passionate about the project. She wrote it, and it was a project she worked on for many years. So having to like her to have to build that trust, and like us like backing it up, like no, like she wants to cast this person for a reason. So it's just like very different standpoint and the team's effort. And that's kind of when I went back, when I was like collaborating. It makes like projects that I've like have collaborated with such amazing teams, or it's like why I always think about them, because some collaborations are a little bit harder than others. But like Lorene was so amazing and so smart and so dedicated that we knew in the end she got the cast that she wanted, but it definitely was a little bit more of a push. While like with Meredith and Mike White, it's like, yeah, you want that? Okay, cool. Like, and they just knew exactly what they wanted.
You hustled for that hustler
staff. Yeah, you did. And that was also a really short process, so that was also really stressful. Only short, that was like a month long, that casting process, and there were a lot of roles. It was nuts.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're never ever given enough time to do our jobs.
I bet you're like, I want someone tomorrow.
No.
And Hustlers is a great cast, so she did a great job.
A lot of weekends on that one as well.
Yeah. Betsy, you've trained with some of the top casting directors in New York. How did these experiences shape your approach to casting, and what the unique insight did you gain from working with each of them? I hear you talk a lot about trust as well there, so do the best casting directors build a lot of trust with movie directors and that they've worked with before, and that's basically the kind of smooth relationship that Brianna was just describing?
Yeah, definitely. I was Ellen Lewis's assistant on a couple projects, and she, on one project for Martin Scorsese and one for Steven Spielberg, and she'd worked with Scorsese for like 40 years or something, since Goodfellas. And watching them work was amazing. I mean, I wasn't in the room seeing them talk about it, but it was amazing to see that we could just have someone come in and she'd be like, that's who he's gonna like, and she'd bring 5 choices over to his house that day or something, and in my head I think, oh, I thought that other person was gonna get the part, and she'd come back and be like, no, that's who got the part, exactly who I thought was gonna get the part, and watching that level of trust and her excitement to work with him, and her excitement about the projects he was choosing and the world she was gonna get to dive into, really made me interested in my career in finding a handful of people that I could just really work with over and over. And that's one of my goals as I'm beginning my career, is just that it's such a magical thing to work with someone multiple times and build a language together and really understand their taste in that way that she understood his taste at such a deep level. Just beautiful, and it's an experience I'd love to have in my life. And then I also worked several times with Meredith Tucker, and I love working with Meredith, and one thing I learned from her is she, when a lot of people will push for, a famous person to be in this role or that role or that role, and Meredith's always like, ugh, I don't want someone where, you know, people are gonna be pulled out of it. You know, I mean, White Lotus is a good example of, you could have that be all, in terms of like who wants to be on that show, it just could be, you know, 10 A-list celebrities every season. But she wants you to be in the world, she wants you to believe the world, she wants you to not be pulled out of certain moments and be thinking about, you know, that celebrity's other projects or something. So she really taught me to just go find the best, most interesting actor for something and not get pulled into this idea that it has to be all about stars and stuff. And she also has like really fun taste, and we would have the same taste about just wanting people who are really quirky and out there, and you know, so I learned a lot from both of those women. I was incredibly lucky to work for them, and they're still good friends. I still ask them questions and advice all the time. Yeah,
I love that. I love, you know, hearing about you guys building those networks and people you trust. Maribeth, you also said that you've worked with Todd Haynes and Mindy Kaling. And so how do you adapt your casting approach to fit their different style and visions? Do you also understand their quirks the same way Betsy was explaining?
I think, you know, working with different directors is kind of like entering your first day of a college class and you get the syllabus and you learn how to write to the professor to get the A. So I think about that a lot. Like some directors, one of my favorite collaborations was, you know, with Laura on a film called Louder Than Bombs with Joachim Trier. And he just loves actors so much that he just wanted volume. And so we'd send, you know, him 2 links and he'd go, yes, more, wonderful. And we were like, okay, well, what did you like or not like? Or like, what do you want, less of or more? He's like, no, just more. And, you know, just loved to hear his beautiful words said aloud and loved actors and appreciated them so much. And so we knew that even with, I mean, and what a pleasure, like for the co-star roles, we were sending like 50 tapes of people going yes, because we knew he needed that. Todd Haynes, on the other hand, respects, I mean, his respect for actors comes out in like, I trust Laura Rosenthal ultimately, I trust the team, so you guys bring me the 10 best people and I'll choose from them. They just have such a great rapport and trust, similar to the relationships Betsy discussed, that it's, so you have to know that like if I send Todd a link of 20 people, he's gonna be like, too much, stop, brain breaking. And so it's just adjusting and knowing, and really asking them for feedback, just that ultimate communication and back and forth. And then you get lucky enough, I've been working with Ed Burns for, I think, maybe 12 years or so. And so that's getting to be that relationship that I dreamed of, where you can kind of just know who Eddie's going to respond to and the type of cadence that he likes and how it sounds in his writing, and I can kind of cast to that. So that's really fun.
Do you ever recommend a specific actor to the director and they're, you know, and you believe in them, that you know they're the right role and they're just like, nah.
Every day. No, I mean, you know, you hope that like directors have a lot of respect, but sometimes as you're getting to know each other, especially in a newer relationship, you're trying to establish, like, we were talking about this earlier, like who's invited to the dinner party and who's appropriate to be invited to the dinner party of the feature and who's very much not. And so as you're learning that, you know, the first thing that I like to do before I even put out a breakdown is I go from my brain first. And my brain isn't full of ideas of celebrities that could be in it. It's like everyday working actors that I think could fit the role. And they're kind of my ringers, or like my favorites that I just always think bring good, interesting work to the table. But sometimes the director might disagree, and that's okay. And then you move on to a more traditional process and you see what you get from there. Yeah.
So question open to everyone, do you guys try to manage your actors' expectations? So if you really love them, do you try not to show it in the casting, you know, audition?
No, we're all the nicest people in the world.
Okay. No, okay.
I mean, yeah, when you're excited about someone, it's hard not to tell them,
right.
But there's also just, I also always tell people, like, there's a million reasons you're not going to get a role. Like, most of the time, it has nothing to do with the work that you brought in, and so just to, like, keep your expectations low in that sense. And I also tell people, like, go into a room, like, do good work. Like, if you do your research, if you're prepared, you're going to do good work. Right. And then leave and don't think about it again, because if you think about it a lot, it'll just like crush your soul. It's a lot of disappointment in this industry, but it really has nothing to do, for the most part, with someone's talent. It's so many other logistical things.
Lots of moving parts.
Yeah, they have to have the talent to start with, but then it's like so many people are talented that then the other things, are added on. Yeah, I mean, I try, if someone's done really beautiful work, I try to tell them they've done beautiful work, because yeah, you don't want to get someone's hopes up, but you want them to know, like, I just watched you do beautiful work, and regardless of what happens, like, you did some great acting today, and that was a pleasure to watch. And I was just on a set this summer of a movie I cast that I had worked on for 4 years, and so I was on the set with them because we had become close, and I'm watching this movie in front of my eyes going, oh my God, this played so many times in my head for 4 years. And I was looking around at the cast, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, every single one of these people is here because of a different audition. One is from 10 years ago when I was an assistant, one's from 2 years ago, but it's like they were all people that I brought up for this movie because of another audition that just lived in my head rent-free constantly. And so every single person, that was true. And I didn't do it, but I was very tempted to go up to each of them and be like, you're here because of that thing 10 years ago. Do you remember it? And so, yeah, we always tell actors, like, just go do beautiful work and then let go of the outcome for that. But if you're just doing good work, we will remember, and you are in our mental Rolodex when you wow us,
And that's a very impressive mental Rolodex as well, by the way.
And sometimes we write it down.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to add that's so important, that I think we've all had really beautiful mentorship opportunities in our lives, is I was really trained to be the kindest possible. And so sometimes that's a balance in the room of, like, we want to make sure that actors, when they're in a space with us, even if it's now in now times via Zoom, that they feel safe and comfortable and artistically supported. And I think that's something that certainly my two co-panelists do in spades and very easily, is like, as warm and as kind as you can be and as supportive as you can be, the actor is always going to do better work. And then sometimes it's hard to get it twisted because you do want to manage their expectations. So I think that's a good question.
And I can definitely attest that they're warmest, sweetest, nicest people. So, all right. I have congratulations to quickly tell to Betsy for your RTS Awards for the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, one of my favorite shows ever. So,
I was the associate on. Meredith Tucker and Jeannie Backrack cast the pilot, and I was the associate, just to be clear of my role. Yeah,
that still counts, but you also got another RTS Awards for Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Can you share some of your casting strategies that you employed for these different projects and that you believe contributed to their success? And also, being from associate to now, growing within your role, like, what did you learn?
Yeah, well, I shared the one Margaret story, and I think, and when I was casting of the Nancy role, when I was casting Margaret, I think I was very, I had loved the book as a kid, and I was just very aware of the fact that this had to be a really interesting, unique kid who you just wanted to spend a lot of time with. And so I think I just worked hard to only show them kids where like you could be with the kid for an hour and a half and never get bored, because these kids were just bringing their own unique selves to it, which I think Abby Ryder-Fortson, who played the part, did beautifully. She's a wonderful actor. So that one and the team was so nice. I was just doing the kids, and that team was so kind to put me on, the team for the award, and they put and I wrote. It was Francine Maisler, who's a very famous casting director, did some of the leads along with Melissa Kostenbauer, who did all the rest of the movie. They were so kind. And so I wrote them just to say, when it came out, when the nominations came out, I wrote them just to say, oh my gosh, thank you for including me on this. It was so kind. I know a lot of people might forget the person who did some kid roles, and Francine wrote back immediately like, oh my gosh, we split this 3 ways. You're amazing. Don't ever say that. They were just so kind in treating me like I was an equal part of the team in casting the kids. And then Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, that was a really fun script to work on. And you can imagine we just saw so many fun auditions. So it was really fun to get to work on a comedy and to get to, and it was my only time until then that I had worked on something with 2 casting directors. So Meredith was doing New York and Jeannie LA, and it was really interesting how one of them would feel passionately about one part and another would feel passionately about the other part, and you really saw how when you're co-casting, you kind of get the best of each, you know, that they both brought such great ideas to the table, and, you know, we're really advocating so much for those people. But yeah, that was a very fun script to work on. I'm the same, I love doing comedy. Yeah. Comedy is like, when someone nails it, it's almost more objective rather than subjective. Like, if someone makes you laugh, it's a good audition. Yes. And so it makes our jobs a little easier. I think in comedy it's a little easier in that way. It's just like, oh, it's good because it's funny, you know?
Definitely. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Brianna, next question's for you. You have credits like The Girls on the Bus and Z-Way. And our question for you is, how do you handle casting ensemble pieces versus projects with a central lead? And what's your process for balancing these dynamics?
Yeah, with ensemble pieces, we kind of mentioned it before, like who's you're bringing to the dinner party. Yeah. Especially like with Z-Way. Z-Way, if you've ever seen that show, it's very satire, it's very out there. And like, that's a set you go on and you're improvising the entire time and you're just playing off of each other. So it's really all about like vibes with that. It's like these people would get along, they would like work well together, they have similar like humor, and that they could really bounce off of each other. So just finding those people that you know that like would just mesh well, and then ending up putting them in a room together. So it's so much like instinctual, like just understanding their personality and like who they are and like who they get along with. And yeah, the same with Girls on the Bus. It's like it's 4 people that were in a lot of scenes the entire show together, and it's like they all had to get along and they all had to be friends, and just being able to like figure out like, oh, who's gonna play the best off of each other so they make the best work, like who's gonna help them get to the highest point they can possible. And so it's just understanding like people's personalities and making sure that they go together.
So when you are casting for something like that and you bring them all together, do you cast them first individually, or do you just start them off like 4 at a time? How does that work when you're trying to nail down like a specific group?
Kind of depends. Usually, so like with Girls on the Bus, like Melissa came with the project, so when we played the lead, and then we brought in the rest of the people. Some of them were read together, some we offered. It honestly kind of depends. Some there were a couple options, some there was like 2 options, and then you can kind of tell like these 2 people would get along better, these 2 people would get along better, just like before you even go into it. And then usually that's the case, and it's like who gets along the best is kind of how that situation is. It's like I know they're gonna vibe, but like the chemistry is gonna be stronger with these 2 versus these 2. So yeah.
Shout out Erica.
Oh yeah, and that Girls on the Bus was Erica Hart, who's amazing, and she's the best. She's also like, she understands people so well, and like you meet her and she meets you, and she can just like pinpoint who you are to a T, so that also helps a lot with that.
This is making me wonder if all of you behind the scenes are very good matchmakers as well in your private lives, because you just know exactly like what a person is like this person would go along with this person. I love that. I want to be invited to the dinner party, by the way. Next question for Maribeth. Can you discuss the process of casting for A Quiet Place versus A Modern Love? Very different project. And how did you approach finding the right talent for these very distinct projects?
Sure. Well, Modern Love, I have to shout out Laura and Jodie Engstreich and Kim Ostroy, who took a massive, like we all worked really hard on that one, because they wanted very famous faces for the leads of every episode. And so, you know, Jodie became an amateur attorney on that job. Like we offered her a certificate at the end of it because she was dealing with like Anne Hathaway's attorney, and then it was like the next episode, and it was like Andrew Scott is now in the mix, and poor Jodie on that one. That was it was a big uphill climb. But it's different genres of work. So Quiet Place, you have a little bit more time. It's a 10 to 12 week to 14 week process. And John had a very specific idea of what he wanted. He was a very big advocate that the daughter did need to be actually deaf. Other people had other opinions, but John really stuck to his guns. That was one where strategically we knew it was Millicent Simmons who we had put in Wonderstruck, but we wanted to and had to do the work anyway of going through a process, and then of course we snuck in Millicent's tape right at the right time that we thought John could finally see it, and she got the job, so that was really fun. And John likes to see a lot of theater in New York, so that was really nice. We got to, try people like that had been in that he loved in Hamilton, and like he was pretty well versed in the New York actor population, so that was nice. But features, always more time, always more money. And then Modern Love is a mini series for Amazon, and just trying to capture. One thing I like about film a lot is you get to spend a long time with the feature director and get to know their style and what they like. But for us, it was a really big challenge because it was episodic, and we hadn't done a lot of that. And so it was very much like, okay, writing to this professor is way different than writing to this one. But then you also have Amazon overlords, so it was a lot of people to be accountable for. But really fun. Some episodes were great. Like one of the best days of my life, I got to go to Tina Fey's office, and it was Tina Fey and Sharon Horgan and John Slattery sitting around a table. And I got so starstruck, even with my job, that I told Tina Fey that she was the best person. I just said, "You're the best person." She's like, "Ever?" And Jodie came in for the save and was like, "This is a big day in Maribeth's career." So that was a really fun job.
That's one thing I was wondering if you guys do ever get starstruck because you're meeting all these big, beautiful personalities.
I don't think I've ever been like super duper starstruck. But if I did this job like in high school, I feel like I would. But now, like once I started, I was like, okay, I have to be like super professional. But there's probably like a couple people that there'd be like, no way, I wouldn't. I remember I was working on a project that we almost got Michelle Obama, and like if I had ever met, like that's where I would get starstruck, like with
Michelle,
her.
you may come in now.
Yeah, but I feel like because you work with like a lot of celebrities, it helps. You get used to it.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, we get starstruck for something we have like an emotional attachment to. So it's like we're so used to being around famous people that the fame itself is not the thing. But I said something once about when I was working for Meredith Tucker, and we shared an office with Dave Capriolotis, who Brianna interned for, and he did a lot of theater. And he was working on something with Phylicia Rashad. And I was like, do people just faint? Like, I was like raised by the Cosbys, like the Cosby Show, like they were my parents growing up. And I was like, do people just lose their words around Phylicia Rashad, who played the mother on the Cosby Show? And he was like, oh yeah, it's crazy. Like people will go up to her just like, and she just has to be like, I know, So we all have our emotional attachment. Yeah, so I was at this very star-studded event this year, lots of celebrities walking around, but then Jesse Plemons walked by, and he's like my favorite. And I was just a little weak in the knees that Jesse Plemons was there, even though there was, a billion people there. So yeah, we just all have our people that like we extra love, yes. And that's usually people's experiences. Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, ladies. I think we're almost out of time. I'm going to open it up to one more audience question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Deanna Hayes. Can you guys hear me good?
Yes, we hear you.
Perfect. I'm an actress in New York City, but I just wanted to ask a question about headshots. I'm about to have a headshot session to get some new headshots, some updated ones. And I just want to know what really stands out.
For me, it's the eyes. So it's just like, I want to feel like you're looking at me. So rather than when you're getting the headshot taken, rather than kind of going like robot mode or something, because you're like trying to like look pretty or something, instead imagine that your best friend or someone you really respect or something is the person in the lens, and really like look at them, because when I'm looking at headshots, I want to feel like I'm connecting with the person, like, oh my gosh, we're making great eye contact and I can really see who they are. And so bring that energy to it and worry less about how everything's looking, and just really like connect to the camera in a really vulnerable, open way would be my thing.
The Mona Lisa stare.
Yeah. Also with the smile, like a fake smile and a genuine smile just tells two totally different things. So like, I know when you're taking a headshot for like an hour, you're like, yeah, I want to be done. But like a genuine smile really does capture so much, and you just get drawn to it. I also like when people like incorporate like their style and aesthetic into a headshot versus like a very plain top and a solid background. I just don't, fashion and like clothes tell so much about a person, so I do like people to incorporate their actual wardrobe instead of like a professional setting like shirt, which is great for like commercials and stuff, but like for film and TV I think it could be a little bit more relaxed. Yeah, you should have a couple different outfits and they should fit different like tones, like a professional and a more casual, but it should be something in your wardrobe, not something that you like bought for this event, like for the headshots.
I was going to say, I think a lot of agents and managers will ask their clients to have like the Law and Order headshot or whatever. I can totally use my imagination and figure out what you're going to look like in a suit. I think before you take your headshot session, I would interview 5 people closest to you, and I would ask them to name their top 3 adjectives that they would use to describe you, and then do it for yourself. And then for yourself, also look in the mirror and go, these are the 3 favorite things about myself physically, and communicate to that to your photographer. I love my jawline, I have great, beautiful eyes, and I love my hair. And then when you're shooting, think about those adjectives. And try, as Betsy said, in terms of like not just kind of having that robotic, tell yourself a story in your head. Because when I'm looking at headshots, sometimes I just cover the whole face except the eyes. And that emotional storytelling that comes from the eyeballs is going to come if while you're shooting, you're thinking about a time you felt blank. And fill in the blank with those adjectives to make the headshot session seem more alive.
Thank you so much. Those were wonderful answers. Please help me give a big round of